Grim to the brim. Grim to the brim. Grim to the brim to the brim.
I like that. Grim to the brim.
Hello, and welcome to Grim to the Brim, a new podcast where we sit and listen to some Grimm's fairy tales and then, I don't know, talk about them a bit, I guess. Joining me this week is...
DaveyMustardface.
And...
Kate.
Oh, and me as well then, Andy.
We're going to have another long story which would warrant some lovely mystical music to open it up. Let's just hear that briefly.
Oh, gotta love that harp.
Gives me goosebumps.
Yeah.
Each and every time.
Lovely harp.
Andy, you seem unmoved by the harp.
No, I'm just quietly appreciative.
Should we play it one more time just to see if it moves you this time?
Okay.
Anything? We'll have a full orchestra next time.
Yes, with a marching band.
See if it can provoke some kind of response.
I'm not a very emotional kind of person, you know? I'm
Just gonna get a Scottish guy playing the full-on bagpipes wearing a kilt. That always makes me emotional.
I would like that. See if we can find one.
Yeah?
I'll have a look.
Okay, thanks. This story is called Hans My Hedgehog. Once there was a rich farmer, and he and his wife didn't have any children. When he went into town with the other farmers, they often made fun of him and asked why he had no children.
That's pretty harsh. Like,
It is pretty harsh.
you just don't go there, you know.
Ha ha, you haven't got any kids. Yeah, no. One day he finally got angry, and when he went home, he said, I want to have a child, even if it's a hedgehog.
Oh,
Okay, so
Then his wife gave birth to a child whose upper half was hedgehog and bottom half human.
wait.
when you're planning a
what?
pregnancy, don't even float it. Just, I hope we have a perfectly healthy human child, is what you should say. Right until the moment of birth.
That's a traditional thing to say.
Well, look what's going to
During
happen.
conception.
It's it makes a lot of sense that she was horrified. So
How does that even happen? Like,
He's just the power of suggestion, you know.
that sounds like this is, yeah, she said, it says when she saw the child, she was horrified and said, you see how you cursed us. So yeah, totally his fault, apparently.
and she also be like mortally wounded, like passing a hedgehog.
You would think so.
Is that covered at all in the story?
No. The extensive damage to her vagina seems to have been skipped.
Well, we'll just imagine that.
You can
part.
imagine it.
Please see
Will do.
like reference sections at the back for full pictures.
Diagrams. There's
All right.
nothing we can do about it now, said her husband. The boy must be christened, but we'll never find a godfather for him. There's only one name I can think of for him, said the wife, and that's Hans My Hedgehog. After he was christened, the pastor said he won't be able to sleep in a regular bed because of his quills. Consequently,
Is my hedgehog his surname?
Is that his full name? Hans
Like
My
is-
Hedgehog, or one name?
It's like 3 words, Hans My Hedgehog.
I mean, the name would have been Hans, really. If you want to pick a name from, just Hans, you know.
Yeah, and if you look, I mean, he already looks like a hedgehog. You don't have to name him
It's going to be clear.
hedgehog.
His mum just, wanted to make sure everybody was certain he was definitely...
I don't
A
think he
hedgehog.
didn't have a chance.
didn't.
What's your name? Hans My Hedgehog? What do you mean? Hans My Hedgehog? What, like your hedgehog? Not Hans My Hedgehog? Are you not just
I'm
Hans?
your hedgehog.
Are you saying your own hedgehog?
You're my hedgehog.
That's confusing, Hans My Hedgehog. Also, were all beds like air beds or something? Like, why couldn't he sleep in a regular bed? What's that all about? What kind of bed does he need?
This family, besides from having a hedgehog as a son, also only have airbeds on their farm.
I did say they were rich. Well, it's air beds, water beds, any sort of mattress filled with something.
No hay for these folks.
Well, actually, consequently, they gathered together some straw, spread it on the floor behind the stove, and laid Hans My Hedgehog on it. So he had a straw bed.
Behind the stove.
Could have just had a normal bed.
His mother couldn't nurse him because he might have stuck her with his quills. So he lay behind the stove for 8 years, and eventually his father got tired of him and wished he might die, but he didn't die, he just kept lying there.
What, unfed? Like, just lie there and just be. Like, 8 years is a long time.
I guess so. Just
I Maybe just like he would eat scraps that fell from the stove, like all those little crusty black bits that go down the back of the stove.
Oh, for 8 years. One day there was a fair in town, and the farmer decided to go to it and asked his wife if she wanted anything. Some meat and a few rolls, she said. That's all we need for the house. Then he asked the maid, and she wanted a pair of slippers and hand-sewn stockings. Finally, he went and asked his son, Hans My Hedgehog, what would you like to have? Father, he said, just bring me back some bagpipes.
Okay, this is a whole new level of random now. Like, why is he even asking him what he wants? He's like, he's hoped that he would die. He's not fed him in 8 years. Now he's gone to the fucking shop and he's like, do you want anything? Like, that's a weird inconsistent relationship they have. Like, and what a request of all requests.
How does he even know what bagpipes are?
He's been lying on a
It's
floor.
just like in the whole 8 years. In 8 years, that's all the family's talked about.
When the farmer returned home, he gave his wife the meat and rolls he'd bought, and he handed the maid the slippers and hand-sewn stockings. Finally, he went behind the stove and gave Hans My Hedgehog his bagpipes. Upon receiving the bagpipes, he said, Father, please go to the blacksmith and have him shoe my rooster. Then I'll ride away and never come back. The father was happy at the idea of getting rid of him and had his rooster shod. When the rooster was ready, Hans My Hedgehog mounted it and rode away, taking some dogs and pigs with him, which he wanted to tend out in the forest. Once he reached the forest, he had the rooster fly him up into a tall tree, where he sat and tended the donkeys and pigs. Indeed, he sat there for many years until the herd was very large, and he never sent word to his father about his whereabouts. As he sat in the tree, he played his bagpipes and made some beautiful music.
I bet it was beautiful, like haunting.
Yeah, how does he even know how to play this thing?
Self-taught, innit?
YouTube tutorials.
To get a good signal behind the stove. Yeah, what was he like? What's he thinking there? Just, I'm going to ride this cock out into the...
Isn't he half human? Wouldn't he be a bit heavy? He's 8 years old.
You don't know whether or not it's a giant rooster or he's just hedgehog size and it's an ordinary size rooster. One day, a king who had lost his way in the forest came riding by. When he heard the music, he was so astonished he sent his servant to look around and see where the music was coming from. The servant looked around, but all he could see was a small animal sitting up in a tree that seemed to be a rooster, with a hedgehog sitting on top of it playing music. The king told the servant to ask the creature why he was sitting there and whether he knew the way back to the king's country. Hans My Hedgehog climbed down from the tree and said he would show him the way if the king would promise in writing to give him the first thing he met at the castle courtyard when he returned home. No danger in that, thought the king. Hans My Hedgehog can't understand writing, so I can write whatever I want. The king took pen and ink and wrote something down, and after he had done this, Hans My Hedgehog showed him the way and the king arrived home safely. When his daughter saw him coming from afar, she was so overcome with joy that she ran out to meet him and kissed him. Then he thought of Hans My Hedgehog and explained to her what had happened. He'd been forced to make a promise in writing to a strange creature who had demanded to have the first thing the king met upon returning home. This creature had been sitting on a rooster as though it were a horse and had been playing beautiful music. The king told his daughter that he had, however, written down that Hans My Hedgehog was not to get what he demanded. Anyway, it made no difference because he couldn't read. The princess was happy to hear that and said it was a good thing since she would never have gone with him anyway. Hans My Hedgehog continued tending his donkeys and pigs. He was always cheerful, sitting there perched in his tree playing his bagpipes. Now it happened that another king came driving by with his servants and courtiers. He too had lost his way, and the forest was so large that he didn't know how to get back home. He too heard the beautiful music from afar, and told a courtier to go and see what it was. So they went to the tree and saw the rooster sitting there with Hans My Hedgehog on its back, and they asked him what he was doing up there. "I'm tending my donkeys and pigs. But what can I do for you?" The courtier asked him whether he could show them the way out of the forest, since they were lost and couldn't make it back to their kingdom. Hans My Hedgehog climbed down from the tree with his rooster and told the old king he would show him the way if the king would give him the first thing that met him when he returned home to his royal castle. The king agreed and put it in writing that Hans My Hedgehog was to have what he demanded. When that was done, Hans My Hedgehog rode ahead of him on the rooster and showed the way. The king reached his kingdom safely, and as he entered the castle courtyard, there was great rejoicing. His only daughter, who was very beautiful, ran toward him and embraced him. She was very happy to see her old father again, and asked what in the world had kept him so long. He told her he'd lost his way and would not have made it back at all had it not been for a strange creature, half human, half hedgehog, who'd helped him find his way out of the forest. The creature had been sitting astride a rooster up in a tall tree and had been playing beautiful music. In return for his aid, the king had promised to give him the first thing that met him at the castle courtyard. Now he was very sorry that it happened to be her. However, out of love for her old father, the princess promised that she would go with Hans My Hedgehog whenever he came. In the meantime, Hans My Hedgehog kept tending his pigs, and the pigs had more pigs, and eventually there were so many that the entire forest was full of them. Then Hans My Hedgehog sent word to his father to clear out all the pigsties in the village, for he's coming with such a huge herd of pigs that anyone who wanted to slaughter one could have the pig. On hearing this, his father was distressed, for he'd believed that Hans My Hedgehog had been long dead. Nevertheless, Hans My Hedgehog mounted his rooster, drove his pigs ahead of him into the village, and ordered the slaughtering to begin. Phew! There was such chopping and butchering that the noise could be heard for miles around. Afterward, Hans My Hedgehog said, "Father, have the blacksmith shoe my rooster once more. Then I'll ride away and never return as long as I live." So his father had the rooster shod, and was glad that Hans My Hedgehog didn't want to return again.
How do you shoe a rooster? Like it's not a horse. Like it doesn't have those sorts of feet. Like it would be quite painful, I think, to shoe a rooster, right?
Probably. I don't necessarily think it needs it either, because it's only got a hedgehog on its back. They're not the heaviest things in the world.
I think you'd basically be removing the rooster's feet and just replacing the feet with a block of metal.
Oh, that's fine. It probably loves that. You know, it's probably perfectly all right with that happening. Every single time he pops home, you take its feet off again.
You have to sort of redo the little bit you'd left before.
His feet might get a bit sore running through the forest. Can you remove them and put blocks of metal in place?
Peg legs?
Jesus.
Not doing a lot of walking, really, is it?
Also, like, he's sitting on this thing's back all day in the tree, all night, like, playing bagpipes. That would drive me fucking mad, you know. There's no rest for this poor thing.
This rooster's like, can you replace my ears as well?
Also, this thing where the first king comes home, he's like, sorry, Hin, I've promised that you would go and live with a bagpipe playing hedgehog, half man, half hedgehog, in the forest, so can you pack your bags? Sorry.
When Hans My Hedgehog departed, he set out for the country of the first king whom he had helped. But the king had given his men orders to stop anyone who was riding on a rooster and playing bagpipes from entering the castle. If necessary, they were to use their guns, spears, or swords to stop him. So when Hans My Hedgehog came riding, they attacked him with their bayonets, and he put spurs to his rooster, and the bird rose in the air, flew over the gate, and landed on the ledge of the king's window. He called to the king to keep his promise and give him the princess, otherwise he would take his life and the princess's as well. Then the king implored his daughter with the best words he could use to go with Hans My Hedgehog to save their lives. So she dressed herself all in white, and her father gave her a coach with 6 horses, splendid servants, money, and property. She got into the coach and was followed by Hans My Hedgehog with his bagpipes and his rooster by his side. They then said goodbye and drove away, and the king thought this was the last he would ever see of his daughter, but things happened much differently from how he thought they would. When they'd gone a little way from the city, Hans My Hedgehog took off the princess's beautiful clothes and stuck her with his quills until she was covered in blood. "This is what you get for being so deceitful," he said. "Go away. I don't want you." Then he chased her home, and she lived in disgrace for the rest of her life.
Right, hold up. So, I just don't even know what to say about this. She then lived in disgrace for the rest of her life.
She couldn't get over being rejected by a hedgehog. Meanwhile, Hans My Hedgehog took his bagpipes, got on his rooster, and continued his journey toward the second kingdom, which belonged to the other king whom he led out of the forest. However, this king had ordered his men to present arms, to allow Hans My Hedgehog to enter, and to greet him by shouting, "Long may he live." After that, they were to escort him into the royal palace. When the king's daughter saw him, she was frightened because he looked so strange. However, she thought there was nothing she could do, for she'd promised her father to go with him. Therefore, she welcomed Hans My Hedgehog and had to go with him to the royal table, where she sat next to him. Then they ate and drank. When evening came and it was time to go to bed, she was very much afraid of his quills, but he said not to fear because he had no intention of harming her. Then he told the old king to have 4 men stand in watch in front of the bedroom door and to make a big fire for when he got inside and prepared to go to bed. And he would slip out of his hedgehog's skin and leave it in front of the bed. The men were then to rush in quickly, throw the skin on the fire, and stand there until it was completely extinguished. When the clock struck 11, he went into the room, stripped off the hedgehog's skin, and left it on the floor in front of the bed. Right after this, the men came, picked up the skin, and threw it into the fire. When the fire had consumed it, he was set free and lay in bed just like a human being, but he was pitch black as if he'd been burned. The king sent for his doctor, who rubbed him with special ointments and balms, and gradually he became white and turned into a handsome young man. When the princess saw that, she was very happy. The next morning, they got up in a joyful mood and had a fine meal. Then the wedding was held, and Hans My Hedgehog was given the kingdom by the old king. After some years had passed, the young king took his wife and drove to visit his father, and he told the old man that he was his son. The father, however, said he had no son, though he once had one, but he'd been born with quills like a hedgehog, and had gone off into the world. Then Hans My Hedgehog revealed himself to his father, and the old man rejoiced and went back with him to his kingdom. The end.
That guy, his dad, was a real piece of shit, and in the end he was like, anyway, come and chill out at the kingdom now. Everything's cool. Even though you just said I was dead.
Yeah.
He did, yeah.
I mean, this farmer started off rich in the first place, and he gets everything in the end.
That's not a good ending. Like, it's not a good lesson in it.
It's not, no.
The only thing that's like really a big deal is like, if you're a bit of an arsehole and lie about your decree, your daughter's going to get jabbed up and called a skank and then just be ashamed for the rest of her life. But if you're all right about it, then things will be really, really good for you. So don't be an arsehole to potential boyfriends of your daughter, I guess.
Yeah, especially ones that look like they're half a hedgehog.
So it was a bit mad that he's like, take my skin off and put it in the fire. Like, what?
Exactly right. Did he know, even when he was first born, I suppose, is whatever the hell he is, that he could take his skin off and then be much better?
Spent 8 years on the floor, like not thinking about that at all.
On the straw behind the stove, watching YouTube for 8 years.
Learning the bagpipes before he even had a set, and then he really mastered them when he got them. Became the best bagpiper in the world.
Just doing air bagpipes for Careless Whisper.
But even if he knew that he could take his skin off and not be a hedgehog anymore, surely he's only just taken his spikes off. He'll still look like a hedgehog, just without spikes.
Still have that hedgehog look about you.
Yeah, and he'll still be a teeny weeny man.
Yeah, that's true. Like, why would he be a full grown? He was small enough to ride around on a fucking rooster.
Yeah. So the princess has married this teeny weeny little man with dinky little hands who still looks like a hedgehog, just a mutated one because he hasn't got any spikes. That's the stuff of nightmares. I don't know why she rejoiced.
She was about to have sex with this hedgehog.
She was, yeah.
Like, it was wedding night. She was a bit worried about being pricked by his quills.
That was it, though. Wasn't put off at all. Just like, it doesn't happen, but I'll still fuck this hedgehog. It's fine.
It's
it's
a duty.
Presumably, though, she's a regular size princess and he's a normal size hedgehog. So he's only going to have a little dick anyway, isn't he? She'd probably be like, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to... Probably not going to feel it anyway.
You think that's what she was thinking about?
Yeah. I'll just spend the rest of my life just having the occasional sex that I can't feel with this tiny little hedgehog man.
Well, I mean, surely he could go in fully himself, right?
Ooh. Wouldn't he suffocate?
Yes.
Or just go in like legs first and just stop when he got halfway.
That must have been what drew him to take his skin off in the end.
A hedgehog's like the size of not a cup, but like a cereal bowl, right? So if he pulls the hedgehog spikes out, it's still a very, very small creature.
Just imagine all these onlookers at the ceremony, like, oh, beautiful ceremony, beautiful, one of the best. Just ignoring the fact that there's this horrible little hedgehog man on the back of a rooster, probably walking himself down the aisle, right, playing the bagpipes.
Playing bagpipes, definitely.
Oh yeah, he wouldn't shut up those bagpipes for even a minute.
It's all been building up to this, all that practice.
Listen, guys, I'm going to pull my skin off. You light a fire. I'll put it in the fire. Yeah, no problem. That's a perfectly normal request. Come on, lads, get the fire lit. He's going to pull his skin off and we're going to put it on the fire.
And then they had to wash him clean as well. Like, scrub him from black into white.
Yeah, he was like burned, and then the doctor. It made out like this was a process that took like weeks and weeks and months. Like he was so
Overnight.
badly burned, but the doctor treated him with ointments, and then he was fine. But then it's like the next morning, the princess woke up and she was overjoyed. So this all happened overnight. That is some fucking miracle cure work, doctor.
So their wedding night was spent with her just lying next to him all burnt up. What a wedding
While
night.
the doctors were rubbing ointments on him. Yeah, it's better than the alternative.
She was probably relieved.
I would be if it was me.
What a horrible story. What were they thinking? I mean, they've wrote some bad stories, but this one takes the cake.
It's pretty mental.
I mean, she was pretty dumb. The princess was pretty dumb. She didn't really think twice about, marrying a hedgehog and then actually going as far as the wedding night as well. And then it turns out that Hans My Hedgehog can de-hedgehogify, and he is now suddenly a man, an ordinary man, with a stupid wife. Kinda makes you think it was prequel to Hans's Trina.
Ah, that's what it was. They never said her name, did they?
They didn't know. She was clearly Trina, and he was Hans.
Yeah, he wouldn't keep going by Hans My Hedgehog. He'd probably shorten it once he de-hedgehogified himself.
Because then that would be silly. People would be like, why are you called Hans My Hedgehog, but you're not a hedgehog? You're just a really small, weird-looking man.
Stop calling yourself a hedgehog. You're not a hedgehog. You're just a really small man. And that's how Hans's Trina got into his life. And we later find out how Hans got rid of his Trina.
Yeah, piecing them together, they all make sense when they're all part of one big story.
It's a lot deeper now. It was deep enough, but it was very strange. It's not so much deep as it just is disturbing. You go back to your dad twice, and he's like, "I thought you were dead. I hoped you were. I wished you dead. Oh, no problem. I'm all right now. Do you want to come to the palace? Have some self-respect."
You only imagine that Hans has done all of this to try and impress his dad.
And it worked.
After he was sort of like thrown behind a stove for 8 years, he was like, I must get out there. I must prove to him how bloody good I am at raising pigs, playing the bagpipes.
If I was Hans My Hedgehog's dad, though, I would still have an issue if he came back and he wasn't a hedgehog anymore, and he'd be like, "Hey, Dad, I'm like the ruler of this kingdom now. Why don't you come and live with me? I'm your son." And you can be like, "Yeah, I know you're my son because you're still 1.5 feet big with weird little T-Rex hands. No, you're a freak of nature. I can't get past it."
We just have to assume that he became normal sized, or maybe that he was like half normal, half hedgehog. Right?
I suppose.
And it was just a big rooster.
No, because he was described as a small creature in the tree.
Then he must have got bigger.
Why?
Just, they're so small. Like, it's noticeably small. It wouldn't ever be normal. It would be always like 1 foot tall. Like, Trina's not that stupid.
Isn't she?
You know what's funny? We said Trina acted like a hedge, and she ended up with a hedgehog. Hey?
See? It's all coming
She
together
acted
now.
like a hedge, and she ended up with a hedgehog. That's
She
what
got treated
happens.
like a hedge.
Yeah.
All these Trina references. What about the people who haven't listened to episode 2?
Well, we don't like to think about those people. Those ignorant bastards.
All right, so yeah. If, like me, you've got no idea what these two are talking about.
I would say it's a shame there's not some sort of internet that you can use to find and listen to episodes, because if there was, you could totally find out all about Hans's Trina.
It's worth listening to.
Some of us have to wait for the podcast man to come round once a week. And sometimes he doesn't have all the podcasts. You just got to take what he's got.
Real to the Breal.
So who's got a reel to the Breal?
I wrote one. This is called Gwendolyn's Curse. There was once a peasant girl called Gwendolyn. Indeed, there were many peasant girls called Gwendolyn, but none quite like her. She possessed a rare gift. Well, not so much a gift as a curse, let's say. She was very beautiful and caught the attention of many a man in her time. Word spread of her beauty, and soon arrived a handsome prince in a carriage encrusted with jewels, pulled by magnificent white stallions. He came bearing a sack of gifts and trinkets just for her. Upon seeing her face, he dropped to his knees and proposed to her that instant. The townspeople looked on in horror, knowing all too well of her curse. "I will accept your proposal," she said, "on one condition." "Anything," pleaded the prince, leaping back onto his feet. "You must first kiss me." "Kiss you?" asked the prince, a little confused. "Of course." "No," screamed one of the townspeople before being restrained. The prince, although nervous, did indeed lean in to kiss the beautiful peasant girl who had stolen his heart. In that moment, he learned of her curse, as her mouth grew to that of 10 times its usual size. Her razor-sharp teeth glistened in rows of 10 or more. He screamed in fright as Gwendolen leaned in closer to his face and tore it to shreds. The townspeople looked away in disgust as she swallowed his head and left nothing but a well-dressed neck. She suddenly turned back into her beautiful self and led her new fiancé away by his hand to his carriage. She flung him in with ease with one hand and grabbed the sack of trinkets with the other, and off charged the carriage into the sunset where they both lived happily ever after. The end.
Is this a story about Ali?
No. Long before I met Ali, by the way, there was a girl that used to go out in Sunderland, and I would meet her like once a week, and we would go to like the Glass Spider. Don't know if you're familiar. You will be familiar with the Glass Spider, right?
Yes.
And I would meet her like once a week. We'd both had a night out and it'd be pretty late. And we'd end up getting off with each other. But she had these fucking... It was as if I called her Shark Girl because it was like every time I kissed her, she became a shark and nearly bit my face off. It was weird. She was a very nice looking girl, but it was like this weird thing happened every time I kissed her where it was just all teeth right in my face. And it was horrible, and I kept forgetting like what she was like, and then I would meet her again and again.
Beer will do that.
It's like, you know, when women give birth and they kind of forget the pain of it. It's kind of like that, I suppose.
Was it not because you were heavily intoxicated every time?
Of course.
So the beer goggles will do that.
How many weeks, months, years did this go on for?
Probably happened like 3 or 4 times. It wasn't like a big part of my life. It's just an incidental thing.
I see these Reel to the Breals as like a good opportunity for therapy.
Yeah.
So I want to know more about this. I want to know...
Therapy for Gwen, if she's listening, she would be thinking twice about the way she kisses her blokes.
Oh, do you think she's still doing it like that?
I would think so. Unless, like, somebody's pointed out to her, you don't have to kiss with as much teeth. It hurts.
I never had the heart to tell her.
That's the thing, is do you not feel real regret over this?
Do I not feel regret?
Yeah, I mean, I would feel pretty bad about never telling Gwen, or like just having that sit-down conversation. If you could speak to Gwen right now, what would you say?
I'd say I hope you've managed to tone it down a bit, because it was pretty full on every single time.
Poor Gwen. I'll wait till you're Reel to the Breal, Andy.
Oh yeah, mine are going to be horrific memories that I want you to like challenge me on.
I thought like it was a story about like a girl who looked lovely on the outside, but she was an ogre on the inside, and you had to appease her with shinies. That's what I thought was about Ali.
No, I wouldn't write a story about Ali like that. That would just be too harsh. I only write that about strangers from the past.
Because you don't have enough trinkets in the world to make her not rip your head off and just leave a finely dressed neck.
Yeah.
I do like that part. I love the idea that he just gets in the back of the carriage with no head, just to live the rest of his life.
Still alive and well. Just got no head.
Just this, yeah. It's a metaphor, that, isn't it? It's not very sympathetic to women, this story, is it? Are we going to have to cancel David?
Shit. I mean, in the story, I brought her trinkets, and I did go along with her, with the carriage and everything. So I don't think I deserve to be cancelled. It wasn't my fault that I got my head bitten off.
You did your bloody best.
I still was a nice guy about it.
What did you bring to the real life, Gwen?
The real
to get a big smooch.
A bottle of orange iron brew flavoured WKD, probably. A lot of WKD in those days.
Yeah.
Wasn't there just?
Shark Girl. I've never given her a name until now because I never knew what her name was.
You didn't know what her name was?
Never knew what her name was, no. Still don't know.
You met up with her 4 times and you didn't know what her name was?
It was like a coincidence every time. It was like, oh, there, it's you again, hey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I know this sort of situation.
It was always the same place, around about the same time, probably like a week or 2 apart. So that's about as real to the Breal as I could get this week in the time that I had.
I enjoyed.
It was deep.
Very deep.
That wraps up this week's episode of Grim to the Brim, where we talked about Hans My Hedgehog, the weird-ass, half-man, half-hedgehog, weird creature thingy. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week. Bye!
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
See you later.
Is that it?
I think that's it.
Grim to the brim. Grim to the brim to the brim. I like that. Grim to the brim.